Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Surah Yunus, chapter 10, and we will cover verses 83 to 92. And I've given it a gist of title, Organizing Self-Development Under a Non-Deen System. These are the references, and this is our contact in case anyone has a query or a question. Recap verses 74 to 82. The verses which were covered in our last presentation. The confrontation between Pharaoh and the messengers, that is Hazrat Musa and Hazrat Haroon, was covered, which gradually resulted in direct dialogue between the religious scholars of Pharaoh and Hazrat Musa. Both sides presented their line of arguments and evidence. Pharaoh accused Musa and Haroon of trying to mislead him and of his people away from the path of their forefathers. He and his cohorts deliberated on the message of Wahi and came to this conclusion that this message of Wahi needs to be confronted through the medium of the religious scholars in the country. They considered it was a threat to their rule and their values and cannot be allowed to flourish among people, including Bani Israel. After Pharaoh's religious scholars presented their reasoning to support the unjust and tyrannical system of the land, Musa presented his side of reasoning based on evidence on the reality on the ground. The guidance presented by Musa was based on haqq, and the case presented by Pharaoh was based on batil. Hence, the latter failed to overcome the reasoning presented by haqq. And it is a fact that if we present the haqq from the Quran and use the same reasoning and logic and the evidence about the batil system, then we will find that people don't have an answer to that. The Quran then concludes that the Deen of Allah, being haqq, will always prevail, even if it is unacceptable to those who are criminals. 1083, that is the first verse of our today's presentation. Man-devised systems create fear and anxiety, which hampers the emergence of human potentials. I'll go over the meanings. Using reasoning and evidence, Musa convinced the people of Pharaoh that they are not on haqq, but no one accepted Eimaan in him except for a few youths from among his people. This was because those people were fearful that Pharaoh and the ringleaders of his nation may place them in some hardship and give them some trouble. Pharaoh was very rebellious and tyrannical in his country and in taking revenge on those people who joined with the opponents, and not one who would stop at any limit. And we see this example in today's world as well, and also in the history. Further analysis of 1083. Here arrives the simile of the Quran, which fits the human world in 2023. Can we observe the glaring similarities between what Allah has noted here and what people in power do under man-devised systems? If people who study the Quran cannot pick up such realities when they are essentially skipping the real issues of life facing humanity, which Allah wishes us to come to grips with. And I have seen this. I put down this comment because this is my own observation based on evidence, that people who even come to the Quran, they somehow miss these things, and they are very much concentrated into the academic side of the Quran rather than looking at it as a system. Let us now analyze this verse in steps. Firstly, only some of the youth among the people started to support Musa convincingly due to his efforts on the path of Allah. Essentially, they were rational thinkers who were looking for guidance and came to this conclusion that Allah's Wahi will lead them to the success which it claims is inbuilt within its guidance. We are faced with an exactly similar situation in today's world. Next is, secondly, many others did acknowledge the message of Wahi as explained by Musa, but their understanding had not yet reached that level of firm acceptance where they were not yet able to overcome fear of Pharaoh. Because the non-divine system, non-Allah system, which is man-made system, will always create fear. They are because they see others, the rulers, they see masses as their subjects, as someone who should obey them. And any dissension, any difference against them will be seen as rebellion. And that is the situation we are trying to explain here. and the Janta around him who had spread fear throughout the land using tyranny and injustice. We witness this clearly in the world in which we reside at present. More reflections on 1083. Thirdly, there were examples of persecution of those who opposed Pharaoh, and we can relate to this aspect in the world of today in every country on the planet. However, the point to note is that Allah is taking notice of it and is then proposing a concrete solution to these issues of human life. Fourthly, Allah here is drawing our attention towards this fact that He is fully cognizant of this issue of the tyrannical and suppressive state on His earth. But since we are looking for His help to address this injustice in the world, hence here is the path to resolve this problem described in detail. Those who acquire precise Eimaan and then do solid deeds will be able to understand what is being stated here. And over here I have quoted a verse from Surah Yusuf. وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَنُعَلِّمَهُ مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ وَاللَّهُ غَالِبٌ عَلَىٰ أَمْرِهِ وَلَكِنَّ أَكْثَرَ النَّاسِ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. In relation to Yusuf, Allah has made it clear to us that if we wish to get His help, then we need to acquire knowledge, learn rational reasoning, and seek help from the Quran. So the issue is that while Quran explains that what will go on in human world or under the man-made systems, it also provides an alternative to that. And that is what we are discussing through the Quran. Next, Allah has invited us to look at the scaling noted in the Quran at various places. However, the important point to note is that the system of Deen should never have been allowed to disappear in the first place, as then it becomes an uphill task to dislodge the system of Taghut. I made this point because since the system has disappeared and in the intervening centuries, there hasn't been the system of Deen, we somehow come to conclusion as if this system of Deen is not practicable or is not possible to re-establish. But this point is for the future generations, that once the system of Deen is established, then we should take adequate precautions not to let it slip away. Next is understanding the human psyche is part of the system of Deen. The Quran has asked us to acquire the need for guidance and to then come to the message of Wahi, as it is the starting point for getting the help of Wahi to sort out worldly matters. And if you remember, Quran has said that we should be looking for guidance and we will get it. And because we have already been looking for guidance and we are on the Quran, so we should also, people who join in, we should also verify it, check it, discuss it with them, that are they looking for guidance or they're not interested in the guidance and they are more interested in the academic side of the Quran. Since Allah has full access to our thoughts, and if those who come to this path start to think about change in the world, then it does draw the attention of Allah. And over here, I've quoted the part of the verse from Surah Taha, Inna Sa'ata Atiyatu Nakadu Fiha Litujza Kullu Nafsin Bima Tasa. The Quran says that people on this path are thinking that what is going on in the world, and human beings are not happy with the state of affairs in the world. And in order to respond to that, we are sending Wahi, and Allah is telling Hazrat Musa and now us that these things are in the notice of Allah. Nothing in human thought goes unnoticed. This is the way Allah's system functions. If we fully commit to this cause of His, which is our cause, then the path starts to become clear in front of us in the light of Wahi. And over here, I've quoted this verse, 5:16, Yahdi behillahu manittaba rizwanahu subul salame wa yukhrijuhum min al-zulumat ila an-nur bi'iznihi wa yahdihim ila siratin mustaqim. The Quran says over here in this 5:16 that whoever is looking for this guidance, then they get onto this path, and as a result, they come out of the darknesses, that is zulumat, into light. And it is according to the law of Allah. And they are guided on to Sirat al-Mustaqim. TOLU-E-ISLAM has all that which is required for the system of Deen. For example, we have members with fairly developed selves. We have the books, journals, lectures, videos, applications, etc. to educate, train, and help develop the selves of newcomers. because we can explain to them, and essentially people can develop their own self. They don't have to be in a congregation. Ideally, yes, as a course, they should be on one platform, but till that is achieved, they can at least make an effort at their own. Above all, we now know the complete procedure and process of getting help of Allah on this path. And of course, we are pursuing this procedure of the Quran. Now, let us look at the next three verses, 84, 86. Becoming fully aware of the world in which we reside is part of understanding Wahi of Allah. وَقَالَ مُوسَى يَا قَوْمِ إِن كُنتُمْ آمَنْتُمْ بِاللَّهِ فَعَلَيْهِ تَوَكَّلُوا إِن كُنتُمْ مُسْلِمِينَ وَقَالُوا عَلَى اللَّهِ تَوَكَّلْنَا رَبَّنَا لَا تَجْعَلْنَا فِتْنَةً لِلْقَوْمِ الظَّالِمِينَ وَنَجِّينَا بِرَحْمَتِكَ مِنَ الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ. Musa told his nation that when you have accepted Eimaan in the truth of the laws of Allah, then do not be fearful of anyone. Have complete trust in the concreteness of these laws. This is the only way in which you will be able to obey these laws after turning away from all non-Allah laws. They said that you be rest assured we will maintain complete trust in these laws. Then they presented this wish of theirs to their Rabb, that you protect us from this, that we may not become a testing ground for the coercion and tyranny of the opposing party. Save us through your rahmat from the tyrannical grip of these people who are transgressing the law of justice and haqq. And we can relate our desires to these three verses as of today. And that is important, that anything arising in our hearts, Allah knows about it. So he is taking care of it, and the Quran is addressing those issues. Psyche of enslavement. These verses, some of the most difficult part of striving on the path of Allah, especially when the messengers tried to infuse life into the literally dead state of a nation. Messengers are also human beings, and the point over here is that if messengers could bring out life within their own self, then of course the people around them, they can also apply it to them and let them know that it is possible to follow Wahi of Allah. TOLU-E-ISLAM is also doing the same. When despite opposition and false labeling, we continue this mission on behalf of Allah, uninterrupted and with vigor, despite hearing frustrated words from all directions. Just see our members on every platform spreading and sharing the message of the Quran locally and across the world to let mankind know that there is a better way to live this life. Despite temptations, we do not get distracted from the clear path and keep our path straight in the light of the Quran. We never ever say that we are doing nothing. And that is important, because whatever we are going through in the Quran, we have to apply it to our situation as of today. And since we claim that TOLU-E-ISLAM is the only platform in the world which talks of the system of Deen and of the pure Quran, hence we have to relate it to our own efforts. A nation living in a state of servitude and slavery for generations has its psyche changed to a very low state of development. And this is something, a point of instruction for us in TOLU-E-ISLAM, that we should understand that people who haven't seen the light of Wahi for such a long time, they need time to understand it. People generally think that this is how human life is meant to be, and they concoct those beliefs which provide justification for their existing state. For example, Qismat, predestination, gods of all kinds, including idols, Taf, clergy, god of quick results. Musa had assessed all this. This is what appeared to be as a moving serpent. And Allah guided him through Wahi that life can appear in dead people if they understand that Allah is with them. Allah who owns the heavens and the earth. His words need to be trusted and then followed. The results will appear in due course in their own time. Expanding it further, these three verses, then the question is put across and it is said in kuntum muslimin, i.e. if you call yourself a Muslim, then you need to accept this guidance, and this will mean that you have now gone on to a different track in life. On this path, no one feels abandoned. Here is an evidence-based definition of a Muslim. So the first verse essentially defines a Muslim. Firstly, accept Eimaan with the connivance of your heart. Secondly, have trust in the laws of Allah, and of course it takes time. We have to gather evidence through our own efforts and in the world around us. And thirdly, submit with the connivance of your heart and mind that this is the path for us. Come together and then stay together. They acknowledge their commitment, and since this is the path of Rabubiyat, this is the one which will take them to the system of Deen. The requirement of this path is that they need to display the divine attributes of Allah and develop firm Eimaan that these will never let them go astray. As noted in verse 3:103, holding on to this support will lead them to success, though at present physical signs have not yet appeared. In fact, physical signs have already appeared before us. That TOLU-E-ISLAM is there as a reality. And then all those who are in TOLU-E-ISLAM are completely motivated towards the system of Deen. And this is the message they convey to everyone. The next part of the verse provides us with guidance about taking precautions on this uphill climb. Rabbana la taj'alna fitnatan lil qawmi zalimeen. And Allah has beautifully translated or conveyed human feelings that do not, this is what people say, that we don't want to be a testing ground for these people who do not accept the message of Wahi, do not want to change their system. Having recognized the criminals now seeking guidance to counter their strategy and tactics, here the address is to Rabb, i.e. making a commitment that we know who are Zalimeen and their fitna, that is the wrong which they resort to. Fitna is used for both sides. It could be trials and tribulations to become stronger, and it can also be externally imposed on human beings. But under the guidance of Wahi, we will overcome all challenges as our efforts are for Haqq, for which the universe is created. So there is a lot in terms of changing our own psychology. And one thing is very clear in all these verses, that Allah knows our deepest feelings, deepest emotions, our deepest desires, our deepest fears. Allah's help and its availability need to be part of our psyche. Being on the correct path, we know your help, that is laws of Allah, is continuously available to us, and we will never feel left alone or not supported, despite the fact that it is not yet visible in the physical domain. So what is being represented here are the desires of the people of Bani Israel and Hazrat Musa and Haroon, but in a way, these are our words, these are our feelings, these are our desires. This is what yu'minuna bil ghaib means, and we will come out of our present state if we continue our efforts on this path. We know your law and your laws do not change, and we have complete trust, and it is based on evidence in these laws. Here comes a challenge for us in TOLU-E-ISLAM. So over here, I've tried to relate it to us. We live in a world which is totally in the control of al-Qawmil Kafirin. We can have subclasses as well, but essentially this is the system around us is an abusive system which is man-made and is enslaving mankind. We do not wish to even listen to the words of the Quran, Allah, Deen. The pure Quran is also disliked by sectarian Muslims, and the Quran has guided us by stating, وَإِذَا ذُكِرَ اللَّهُ وَحْدَهُ شَمَازَتْ قُلُوبُ الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ بِالْآخِرَةِ وَإِذَا ذُكِرَ الَّذِينَ مِن دُونِهِ إِذَا هُمْ يَسْتَبْشِرُونَ. This verse really sums up the facts around us, that when Allah alone is mentioned to these people, their hearts are filled with disgust. They are those who do not have Eimaan in the hereafter. This serves as a visible and concrete criterion to judge others who turn their backs on the pure Quran. This point is only in order to recognize these people, otherwise we treat everyone with respect as human beings. So we should not take this as if start disliking people. That's not the point over here. The point over here is to recognize it so that we don't get discouraged. If people do not respond to the Quran, and if we expect them to respond, then it is our expectations which we need to modify. Finally, Allah confirms his undertaking that he will never let the efforts of Mu'mineen go to waste, because they are carrying out those duties which are indeed duties of Allah. This is a companionship based on one ideology. And we have touched this subject before as well. 1087, convert homes as centers to learn Deen. وَأَوْحَيْنَا إِلَى مُوسَى وَأَخِيهِ أَن تَبَوَّأَ لِقَوْمِكُمَا بِمِصْرَ بُيُوتًا وَاجْعَلُوا بُيُوتَكُمْ قِبْلَةً وَأَقِيمُوا الصَّلَاةَ وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. After this, practical steps were initiated for this system. For this, we said to Musa and Haroon that for the time being, begin their intellectual and emotive training in Egypt, where your nation is. Pharaoh will not give permission for this, that you make some training center for your party where their meetings could take place. Hence, for the time being, start this process within the homes of the members of your Jamaat, and in this way initiate this system of Salat, which is eventually going to encompass the whole of the society. And keep giving the glad tidings of the outcomes and successes of this system to your Jamaat, so that their courage remains fresh and invigorated. There's a lot in this verse, and we'll go some of these points. Further reflections on 1087. Here comes a great guidance which we in TOLU-E-ISLAM are already pursuing. Just reflect here how the Wahi of Allah guides us in all circumstances, and we need to apply it according to the circumstances which we face during our journey of life. For an ideological movement based on the Quran, which is totally different from all other ideologies pursued by man, we need people with firm Eimaan and highly developed selves to provide the initial seeding of this system. And this is an important point for us, because if we don't have initial seeding for this system, then we cannot establish the system. This system needs extremely highly well-informed, well-understanding, completely converted mu'mineen who can start it. Allah has here recognized the difficulties and challenges faced by Musa and Haroon in terms of providing education, training, and development of the self, which need a long lead time. Even in a relatively less developed system, the human self being the same needs to be confronted with the serious issues of life in the light of Wahi. Because Pharaoh was not going to allow them to have centers outside and which are visible to everyone else. So over here, Quran has directed them that wherever you are in your own homes, you start doing this education, training, and self-development. We can relate to this in our world in 2023, where there is antipathy towards the system of Deen, in fact, to the word Allah and the Quran. All these Muslim nations who, though verbally acknowledge the Quran to be the book from Allah, in practical terms, they follow the secular system, that is the man-made laws of the West, and join hands in all non-Allah events in the world, which includes the fanning of wars and conflicts. They are very much a party to strengthening the roots of this system, which enslaves human beings. And we witness it. It's all based on evidence. I don't want to go into these details, but one can provide salient details and by reading through, for example, Wikipedia or through internet. Never ever think of giving up, erase this option from our minds. The issue here is that the Quran is asking us not to give up, saying nothing can be done. Quran is saying that don't give up. There is an alternative given to you, which is in the shape of Wahi of Allah. And if you follow this path, then you will get help. There's a lot we can do even under very difficult circumstances, and especially on the ideological front, where the human self takes time to come to grips with the issues of life. For example, the first step is to understand man-made systems and their weaknesses, which actually motivates us to seek Allah's help. Here, Allah has directed us to turn our homes into learning centers. For example, family members, neighbors, others interested in the system, friends who become interested, etc. Do it by taking necessary precautions, and this will help to unite your hearts, as noted in 3:103. Without removing differences, we can never develop unity of purpose. The Quran has drawn our attention to another important aspect in the verse, وَجَعَلُوا بُيُوتَكُمْ قِبْلَةً. And Qibla means something which is kept in front, which is the focus of attention, which is about our aim, and keeping that aim in front, and also the path to that aim. Both should be kept in front. Make your homes as your Qibla. Who will be the focus of attention all the time? Allah and His Deen. And then followed it with the term Aqimus Salat. See, Quran has defined its own terms as Salat very clearly in this verse. This establishment of Salat will start to take shape. We need to pause here and reflect until we can come to grips with what is stated here. That is, this salat is the one which will then go on to help to establish the system of Deen. And it's not a ritualistic salat. And that is the point which we should keep in mind. Learn to self-motivate using the Quran. In this verse, Allah has pointed to a sequence to carrying out our actions, not to hasten in pursuit of sawab. Without the system of Deen, deeds go wasted despite following the rituals of sectarian religions. And we see that around us world because nothing will change. In fact, these ritualistic practices outside the system of Deen are the one which contaminate our minds. And people even shun science. They stay away from science and development as well because it takes us to a very lazy kind of a mentality and outlook where we leave a lot of things to Allah, to Qismat. The Quranic term salat has a specific connotation, and this must lead to concrete outcomes in the outer world. It must prevent us from, and I quoted one verse over here, Atlu ma uhiya alayka min al-kitabi wa aqimis salata inna salata tanha anil fahsha'i wal munkar. Recite to them from the book with a view to establish salat, and this salat will help remove shameful and unjust deeds. Through the system of salat, change occurs in the outer world, and forbid evil and promote maruf is part of this. Verse 2, 177 spells out the procedure from Eimaan to becoming muttaqi. We have gone through this verse a number of times before as well. Without comprehending it in detail and making it part of our psyche, we will not benefit from the Quran collectively. Individually, we can argue about it endlessly with nothing for us in terms of our self-development. The whole has to be directed towards the system of Deen, and this is what this verse tells us clearly. Then Allah concludes in a very clear and factual style, وَبَشِّرِ الْمُؤْمِنِينَ. So Quran does not leave things to abstract ideas. It turns it into a practical side that if you follow this path, then be assured that glad tidings are awaiting you. Why do all this? Because you all are dealing with Allah who owns the heavens and the earth, and now the guidance has arrived. Hence, as mu'mineen, there are better days ahead as per the law of requital. Learn about the mechanics of functioning of the system of Taghut 1088. I'll go over the meanings. Musa said that I will do all this. However, this thought keeps arising in the hearts of the people of my nation that when this is the law of Allah, that the system based on injustice and tyranny cannot be prosperous, then why is it that Pharaoh and his cohorts are getting the means of adornment and luxury and the means of sustenance with such abundance that on their basis they prevent people from coming to the path of Allah? Hence, O Rabb, destroy their possessions and wealth and take away the intelligence and comprehension through which they plan these kinds of humanity-destroying techniques. This is because these people will never accept Eimaan in the truth of your laws until such time that they witness this kind of chastising punishment with their own eyes. A lot in this verse, 1088, reflecting on various points. This appears to be the state of psyche of Musa and his companions, where after years of confrontation with Pharaoh and his cohorts, they come to a serious conclusion regarding the state of affairs in the land. Because they have observed it over many, many years, and in fact, Bani Israel were there for probably a few centuries, and they had seen how the system had transformed from the time of Hazrat Yusuf to their own time. Just like Nuh, he plus Mu'mineen also reaches this conclusion that Pharaoh is not going to budge and is not going to come to the guidance of Wahi. This verse also indicates that they have reached this kind of a conclusion that over years of Hazrat Musa dealing with Pharaoh, that he's not going to change and he's not going to let Bani Israel go. Hence, making further efforts in this direction is not going to produce any positive outcome, as all those who wish to change have responded to the Wahi of Allah. Musa and Haroon now desires to take Bani Israel and others, if any, out of Egypt, away from the hegemony of Pharaoh, so that he could continue with the education, training, and self-development of his people. His aim is to move to a land where they can establish the system of Deen, where they are not subject to man-made enslaving laws. He and his companions worked out the details as is evident from other verses, and they expressed their plea to Allah to obtain strength in this direction. The wording used here reaches into the finer aspects of thinking of Musa and Mu'mineen when he says that firstly, Pharaoh and his courtiers possess material power which is preventing them from thinking of an alternative. And it is a fact of life that when human beings accumulate power and it is not guided by permanent values, then they try to use it against fellow human beings. And we see that in being demonstrated in our world. Secondly, in order to think about Rabubiyat, this is an impediment on this path, O Rab. So unless they are deprived of the means and resources behind their power, they will keep misleading the masses. Here is the plea from all of them, how can we get this power? So what they are saying is that when they see this material power of Pharaoh and his forces, now they are not sure how to counter it. And here Quran is telling us the procedure how to counter it. And previously it has said that you first establish centers of learning within your own homes and keep strengthening your own resolve against the system and support for the system of Deen. How unguided material strength affects human psyche. Thirdly, the accumulation of this wealth and possessions has turned their hearts into stones. And this is a very important point, which I thought is worth expanding, that what this material wealth has done on the hearts of these people who are controlling this system under Pharaoh is that they have become harder now. Once they are, of course, Hazrat Musa and Haroon and Mu'mineen over there would have drawn their attention to the wrongs they were doing in the land. And this hardness is going to keep increasing with time. Therefore, psychologically, they simply cannot come to the path put forward by Wahi. And we can see that in our world as well. The things keep going from bad to worse. Here is the conclusion in the light of Wahi, which serves as criterion for us in TOLU-E-ISLAM, i.e., never have false hopes about the people in power who have rejected the path of the Quran. Never expect that they are going to change at their own without the system of Deen, without being confronted by Haqq. The whole point of the Quran is to confront Batil with Haqq. If we do, then we will waste our time and energies on those aspects when Allah clearly states that they are not coming to this path as they have crossed all limits as defined by the Quran. And we can try that. We should give the message like Musa, he went to Pharaoh and kept giving him message. And of course, he confronted their religious scholars as well as the magicians. But deep down, we should keep it in mind that what if they don't change? So we should have an alternative strategy. The Quran has drawn our attention to this aspect of the human psyche in verse 274. Summa kasat qulubukum min ba'di zalika fa hiya kal hijarati aw ashaddu qaswatan. Then your hearts were hardened. These became like a stone and even worse in hardness. And interesting is that this verse is addressed to Bani Israel. And we can see the same state of our sectarian Muslims. They are not very different from the Bani Israel whose picture is depicted here. Interestingly, here the Quran has commented on the psychological state of Bani Israel. The today's Muslims can hold international football, but they don't see poverty in the world. Hence, this is universally applicable to any people who do not follow the guidance of Allah. They gradually end up in this state of no return and then sign their death warrant in this life, i.e., cut short their existence. Obviously, as they do not have a moment's self, they have nothing in the hereafter. Rabubiyat requires profound reflection. For weak hearts, this task may appear to be an impossible undertaking on behalf of Allah, but here comes the essence of this whole matter. Let us examine this verse in parts and then see the miracle of the Quran. Waqala Musa Rabbana. Musa tells Allah that Rabubiyat cannot come to this land or elsewhere unless these conditions are met. You already are aware, but now we know too. Innaka ataita Pharaona wa malahu zinatan wa amwalan fil hayati dunya. That is the next part of the verse. These people in power have all the means to unleash their power on the masses, and unless these means of power are weakened, we think we cannot accomplish this. And you know too, in the time scale, we are expected to do this. Rabbana layudillu an sabilika. With this power, things are further deteriorated as they are misguiding more and more away from your path. Because people who are in position of power, they attract others, particularly those people who do not want to come to the Quran. They also want to become rich, and they are quite happy to exploit others. Next comes a very powerful statement of the Quran from the lips of Musa. Rabbana atmis ala amwalihim washdud ala qulubihim fala yu'minun. Their hearts are now hard like rock, and their source of power needs to be dealt a blow. There is no possibility of their accepting Eimaan as per the evidence, and over here Allah agrees here with the assessment of Musa. Interesting, it's all noted from the direction of Allah. Signs of a developed self. Now comes the firm conclusion of Musa based on the evidence of years of dealing with Pharaoh and his cohorts, and he states, Hatta yaravul azabul alim. He supplicates to Allah that they need to be faced with the outcomes of their ill deeds, and we would like to see it with our own eyes. Just concentrate on this word, yaravu, that is, want to see it with our own eyes. This is to ensure no doubt is left in the hearts of Bani Israel that Allah's law of requital does work in the human world. The Quran has described this account with full focus on the human psyche, which is gaining knowledge, understanding, and the ability to interpret events using the Wahi of Allah. This is the way the Quran helps to train us and strengthen our Eimaan in the laws of Allah. We can literally feel the firmness and resoluteness of Musa, Haroon, and Mu'mineen on this path, where they have drawn firm conclusions beyond any doubt, and with no wavering that now the decisive moment has come where they need to make a choice to leave this place. The Wahi of Allah guides us precisely if we keep an eye on the changing circumstances and our own state of development as we go along on this path of Allah. Develop self-manifesting steadfastness. Qala qad ujibat da'watukuma fastaqima wa la tattabi'ani as-sabila alladhina la ya'lamun. The meanings on this, Allah stated that we have heard the supplication of both of you brothers and have also accepted it. But its fulfillment is dependent on your own toil and effort. Hence, display total steadfastness in your program, and in haste, do not adopt the technique of those people who are not familiar with our laws and the mode of their becoming effective, who are not familiar with it, hence they adopt wrong methods for the sake of producing quick results. Great instruction. Signs of the acceptance of our supplications. What is noted in this verse is a great instruction and guidance for us, i.e., if our path is according to the Quran, then our supplication will be answered by Allah. As noted in 2:186, we have gone through this verse previously as well. When my servants ask you about me, I am indeed close. I listen to the suppliant when he calls on me. And that is the important part. Let them also listen to my call and have Eimaan in me, that they tread on correct path. So it is a sort of a companionship, but in this, the initiative is with man. Man has to first take steps to follow Allah's path and commit to it completely. Firstly, it is acknowledged that the supplication has been accepted, hence now stay firm on the path. Secondly, do not follow the path of those who do not possess knowledge. This means that we need to have knowledge about those who can divert our attention, can subvert our efforts, cause dissensions, weaken our resolve, give non-Quranic opinions, resort to frustrated talk, have their own agendas. And of course, to counter that, we must have enough knowledge to understand it and not to go away from Sirat al-Mustaqim. We can easily relate this state of Bani Israel to the situation we faced in today's world. Whatever may be the technology and state of development of the world, underneath we deal with the same human frailties and strengths which were faced by the messengers of Allah in their own eras. If it was different, then it would have been injustice by Allah. And this is important, that consistently human beings remain the same, and they will remain the same till the last day on this planet. 189, expanding it further, Allah has reaffirmed the importance of remaining firm-footed on this path both are instructed to remain fastaqima. That is, both Musa and Haroon have been guided that just remain firmly on this path and remain established and keep doing what you are doing under the light of Wahi. Without this, nothing will materialize, i.e., to be balanced, solid, put in sustained effort, putting things right. Even under the man-devised systems, individuals who get the opportunity and then avail it have to work very hard to get somewhere. We need to relate these aspects of the Quran to our living within the system of relative values. I said this because at the moment we are in a man-made system, and we have seen that those people who avail the opportunities and work very hard, they are also they also become successful in their aim. Now comes the next important aspect of guidance. وَلَا تَتَّبِعْ سَبِيلَ الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ. Never to follow those who are ignorant deliberately or otherwise, for example, due to the system, but can use their intellect and emotive makeup, i.e., are quite vocal and express their opinions frankly. We come across people like that who can talk endlessly on any issue, and we may get impressed by this and may even think to take them on board. Allah has warned us about this by asking us to check the state of their knowledge and understanding over a period of time using the value system of Wahi. So that is important, that this path is full of risks as well. And the people come with all kinds of backgrounds and with all kinds of fixated ideas to this path. So in order to benefit from numbers, that is, of course, more people will join in as the time goes on. But we had to educate them, train them, and then sort them out according to their proclivity towards the system of Deen. This also means to educate and train people so that they do not misguide themselves and others because of their ignorance and being illiterate. One of the things which we need to inculcate is that anyone on this platform must use the Quran as an external criteria. They should avoid saying, this is my opinion, this is my understanding. They should present Quranic verses and evidence from the Quran to justify to their opinions or to their expressions and their understanding. Without the Quranic verses being quoted, it is not possible to judge people on this platform. Another point of instruction here is that never let such people anywhere near the decision-making aspects of Deen. Now, next verse 1090, words of Eimaan under duress are meaningless. And I'll go through the meanings. This is a very interesting verse in relation to the destruction of Pharaoh. Ultimately, what happened was that we took Bani Israel and releasing them from the slavery of Pharaoh. So over here, Quran has omitted number of steps in between which are covered elsewhere in the Quran. Ultimately, what happened was that we took Bani Israel and releasing them from the slavery of Pharaoh, securely and safely deposited them on the other side of the river or sea. Pharaoh and his army pursued them so that they could capture them and shower tyranny and cruelty on them. They became so intoxicated in power and transgression that they did not even anticipate that they will become drowned. Hence, when Pharaoh was going to be drowned together with his army and he saw death before his eyes, in order to save himself from it, he cried out that I accept that none else has sovereignty other than that Allah, in whom Bani Israel has Eimaan. He is the one and only Allah. I too wish to be among those who submit with heads bowed before his laws. So some interesting points are covered over here by the Quran. Pharaoh on the path of suicide. Bani Israel, under the guidance of Musa, left Egypt for good and went towards Sinai historically, and in the process went on the other side of the sea, possibly Red Sea. In another place, it is stated that they left at night. Possibly Pharaoh knew they are going to leave, but did not interfere immediately, considering the impact on his own people, as it would have created conflict in the land. These rulers, these tyrannical rulers, are very careful. They do take into account the public opinion. So it is possible that Pharaoh did not want to create problems among his own people by openly attacking Bani Israel once they were about to leave. Now there was no reason for Pharaoh to chase them as they were weak and vulnerable. and he had plenty of population to serve his ends, but still he considered it his duty to teach them a lesson for trying to escape his subjugation. And this is something very important for us over here, a great lesson, great instruction from Allah. We witness this frequently in our world of today, where the powerful nations go and invade other lands because of their desire to display their authority and to rob them of their natural resources despite having enough in their own lands. This is an important aspect of the human psyche, which as students of the Quran we need to comprehend in detail. And that is why we need Deen, because Deen counterbalances tyranny in the world. It stops others from doing wrong. Two words are mentioned here by the Quran which sum up the unbridled human intellect's traits, baghyam wa adwan, transgressing limits, arrogance and injustice, inserting wedges, causing divisions, discrimination, causing enmity, etc. Both terms define evil in its worst form among humans, and here Pharaoh is the embodiment of these traits, and we witness this in today's world in every state. This is what Allah wishes us to eliminate through the system of Deen, and He is willing to extend His help if we volunteer to do this. Over here, we will not go into the details of which part of the Red Sea they crossed, because that is irrelevant. The issue over here is, for us in 2023, what is the lesson for us? What is the instruction which the Quran is giving us? Further reflections. The next comment by Allah is an amazing description of the human psyche. Hatta iza adrakahul gharaqu. He and his army were proceeding confidently and with pride in their power in numbers and weapons, and the outcomes of their deeds caught up with them, and they found themselves in the midst of being drowned. Next, Allah has noted the reaction of Pharaoh, and that is interesting. Qala amantu annahu la ilaha illa allazi amanat bihi banu Israel wa ana minal muslimin, expressing the desire of having Eimaan in the Allah of Bani Israel and wishing to be included among Muslimin. Here the Quran has described the frailty of the human psyche, which never accepts the guidance of Allah rationally, but is quite happy to declare it verbally in order to avoid an immediate catastrophe. Why do humans do this? And that is an important point for us as students of the Quran. The display of this kind of mentality is noted by Allah in this verse, for example, وَإِذَا مَسَّ الْإِنسَانَ ضُرٌّ دَعَا رَبَّهُ مُنِيبًا إِلَيْهِ. In trouble, man resorts to all kinds of supplications, and this is due to not understanding the working of the law of requital. As we know, the Quran puts forward its guidance to let us know the way Allah's laws function and how we should deal with the events in our life effectively, whether it is a man-made system or the system of Deen. Under Deen, of course, we will know these details right from our childhood. 1091-92, one phase of accountability ends. I'll go over the meanings of these two verses. On this, the Wahi of Allah declared via the tongue of Musa that throughout your whole life you have kept on adopting a path of transgression against haqq and justice and resorted to fasad in the land. You were repeatedly warned to abandon this path, otherwise you will become destroyed, but at that time you did not heed one thing. Now when death is standing before you, then you suddenly remember Eimaan. The one thing is clear, that Pharaoh knew what Eimaan is, and he thought that at the last moment it might help to delay his death. Now this Eimaan is of no benefit to you. This is because the Eimaan which is accepted due to fear and fright, it simply cannot be declared to be Eimaan. Now you have to become drowned. However, what we will do is that your corpse will be protected from the waves of the sea, so that it will be a sign for instruction for those generations who will come after you. This is because there are many people who are not swayed by the intangible signs of our law of requital. For them, only these kinds of physical signs can be a cause for instruction and learning a lesson. I don't think many are learning a lesson from his dead body as well. Further reflections. Here arrives the important drop scene of the account of the confrontation between Haqq and Batil, and Allah has summed it up in two verses to ask us to register it solidly in our minds and hearts. Pharaoh continued to do evil despite being warned by Musa and Haroon and a moment of his own accord. That is in chapter 40. These details are covered. And this completed the requirement of the permanent Wahi of Allah that no people are destroyed, i.e., their physical life is cut short without being warned of the consequences of their wrong path in life. The Quran has gone into details of the evil human psyche, which refuses to accept that physical power can be taken away by the law of Allah. The same is true today. The biggest evidence of this is our physical death, which arrives at some point in our life's journey and does not spare anyone, be it rich, middle class, or poor, created by man-made systems. The Quran has commented here after his demise for our guidance that in order to avoid such a situation where we regret taking a fatal, self-destroying path of life, we need to ensure that we are not part of al-mufsideen, those who create imbalance in the world. Rather, we are on Sirat-e-Mustaqim. Expanding a bit further these two verses, addressing Mu'mineen, the Quran has asked us to strive against these forces and never become hopeless of the aid of Allah, despite the power of the tyrants of your era. When we get on this path and work for this cause, then essentially it becomes a fight between Allah and the forces of Batil. We have already seen in the case of Nuh that those people also became eliminated by having their physical existence on the planet cut short, and Nuh and his companions became established in the land vacated by them in this process. Here too, as we will see in other verses, Pharaoh and his forces got destroyed, and as a consequence, they became weak and got replaced. Another interesting part of this episode is the preservation of the dead body of Pharaoh, which was discovered in the early part of the 20th century and is now lying in Egypt as a sign for all to see. However, despite this physical sign, very few minds go beyond seeing it, but not letting their intellect go in the direction of the cause for this destruction and then making an effort to find it out from the Quran. Muslims also read these verses day and night and never think of the system of Deen. Another point to consider is that we should not wait for the destruction of evil through some natural event or their own errors of judgment, but should continue passing the message of the Quranic guidance and at the same time adhere to this path together and keep enhancing our understanding of the system of Deen. Now, finally, to conclude, some general points of interest. I added this slide, these two slides, in fact, there are 4 points over here. And to say that what Quran is trying to tell us is that Allah is fully aware of what is going on in the human world, and He's the one, since He has created human beings, so He knows all spectrum of human thoughts and all kinds of human psyches. So that is the way we should view the Quran and take benefit out of it. The meanings which we try to obtain from the Quranic verses are there for our guidance. We try to relate these to understanding the problems created by the unbridled human intellect, and then we seek those meanings which are applicable as solutions as offered by Allah. The question which may come to our mind is why can we and TOLU-E-ISLAM see it and others cannot, at least so far? And for that, I think the credit goes to Allama Pervez, who spent the whole of his life in putting those books together on the system of Deen and the human psyche, which can establish the system of Deen. So far, we have seen that whatever meanings we have acquired from the Quran, these do help us to understand the human world and its functioning better. And these simply cannot be conceptualized by anyone who is not approaching the Quran in the context of the system of Deen. Without the aim of Allah's Deen, any meaning given to human existence is not such which can take it beyond the realm of physical death. And that is an important point for us to think and come to grips with. Whatever meaning one may hold without the Quran, it will end with the expression, "This is the only life I have." Hence, my aim of life must be predicated on this assumption. Allah has created this universe with human beings with choice and intent, and then, according to His promise, provided Wahi, which outlines the essence of the purpose of this creation. The Quran, from beginning to end, summarizes detail of this, and we, that is, i.e., self-conscious beings, as His creation, are equipped with all the requisite intellect, emotions, and desires to either pursue our own aims based on our desires, that is counter to the aim of Allah's purpose of creation, or to make a conscious choice to take the path defined by Allah and thus benefit from His guidance in His presence. So two paths are very clear. The paths which are pursued by people without the Wahi of Allah, we are aware of that. Once we were on that path, so we simply cannot forget that path. We know what that path was like. So our job is to draw people's attention that there is a better way to live this life, and particularly because this life then becomes connected to the life of the hereafter. And in the process, we also make the life of masses, mankind, better by establishing the system of Deen. This creates a different self which meets the criteria of Deen in this world as well as of the world of the hereafter. We need to somehow come to grips with this fact of our existence. And this is something which is very difficult, we find, to pass it on to others. While we understand the significance of following the path of Deen and having Deen in the world, somehow I've seen that we find it difficult to pass it on to others and make them understand. The state of ourself is such that neither Allah nor any other human being can have access to this inner mechanism of our completely autonomous decision-making mechanism. And we can check it. It's not something which we cannot check. That we have zero access to other human beings. Every human being is a complete unit in terms of making their own choices and their own decisions. It is always going to be our individual choice, and we need to somehow find an appeal in this fact about our finite physical existence in this life of ours. And finally, the Quran beautifully sums it up when it says, "Afala yatadabbaruna al-Qur'ana am ala qulubin aqfaluha." Do they not reflect in the Quran, or are their hearts locked up by them? Allah will never ever guide anyone. It is human beings themselves have to make that decision whether they accept the guidance of Allah or not. So they have to guide their own self by making their own choice. We need to keep appreciating this aspect that our hearts are not locked up anymore. So that way I said that at least we should be on this platform, know that our hearts are not locked up anymore by our own self. We have come to this guidance and we are getting maximum out of this guidance, and better days lie ahead. Thanks for your time and for sharing this today. Please feel free to share it with your contacts. You may like to subscribe for future talks related to the Quranic system of Deen.